Hello Fretwellers and welcome back to my Minecraft tutorial series. This is episode 51 and in today's episode we're going to be talking about the Redstone Torch and the Redstone Block. So over here at our key components station we have the Redstone Torch right here and the block of redstone as it's officially called, but everybody calls it a redstone block right here. And I decided to do these two together because this one doesn't have a whole lot of properties on its own, and they kind of do similar things. So that's why I decided to do these two together. So we're going to be focusing on this specific section right here, and we're going to be kicking off with the redstone torch. So here is the crafting recipe, a stick and a piece of redstone above it. I think I already showed that off when we did the monster spawner trap, but if you did not watch that video, then there it is. Just going to set the time today here, and now let's begin talking about the properties of the redstone torch, because the redstone torch is very versatile. We can use it in a lot of different ways when getting funky with redstone. So the first thing you need to know about the redstone torch is it's a source of power, and as we learned in the last episode, power travels 15 blocks, and that is the same here. So 15 blocks from this torch is how far power will travel, and then it will be dead. And that's pretty much everything as regards that. So one thing that is really useful as regards redstone torches is it inverts the signal of any block that is receiving first degree power. So I have this demo set up here. As you can see right now, the light is on, and if I flick the lever, that energizes this block, which gives this energy here, which gives this block first degree power, which then turns these torches off, which then turns the light off. And we use this most commonly with the daylight sensor over there, and we'll talk about this more when we get to the daylight sensor tutorial, and we'll talk about how we can use this. And this has a name. This is known as a NOT gate, and we'll talk about that more when we get to logic gates a bit further down the line. So it will only give first degree power, the torch will, when it's sat on top of a block to the block directly above it. So I have this little demo here showing where it will power. Any blocks around the side will receive second degree power. See? Does not travel to the second lamp there. But here, as you can see, I can put my lamps all around and they all light up. So do take note that the redstone torch does not power the block below it at all. So I can put lamps here all day and they won't turn on. So let's talk about the properties of this and how we can use this to our advantage. And the one big advantage with this is this thing. This is vertical wiring. We can use this right here to send wire vertically, because in some situations you do want a signal to travel up somewhere, and it's very compact as well and saves on resources thinking about it as well. So we have this demo here. The lamp is currently turned off, and that's because this block is being energized. As we know, the lever is on, which gives power to these redstone dust here, which energizes this block with first degree power, which turns this torch off. As we learned over here, it inverts the signal, which then turns this block off, depowers it, which then makes this torch come on, which then powers this block, turning this torch off, and so on all the way up. You could send this 256 blocks if you wanted to, because that's the world height, but you get the idea. So if I flick the lever here, I've turned the power off now, so that this block here is no longer receiving first degree power, meaning that this torch right here is free to power this block, which then all of a sudden inverts this torch and turns it off, which turns the power off on this block, which turns it on, and we go all the way up in that same fashion, and it turns the light on. So let's just recap quickly here. So by default, well, in this case, if I extended it one more, then it would be off by default. But as we can see right here, this block is receiving first degree power, so that this torch is off, meaning that this block is not being powered, which means this torch can turn on, and so on, so that we have the light turned off. But if I flick the lever, it inverts, and the light turns on. So, redstone blocks, redstone torches that are sat on the side of a block like this, so it can be placed on any side of a block, will also only give first degree power to the block directly above it, like so. But they will give second degree power to the blocks around it and the one right below it, as you can see here. But it does not power the block behind it, the one that it's sat on, at all. So just take note of that. So, there's one thing that you need to know as regards this. As we know, we can put redstone dust here and it powers just fine. But watch what happens when I put redstone dust on top of this block. There we go. That is basically something that you really usually don't want. What happens here is the torch powers this block right here, which powers this redstone dust right here, which then powers this block, turning this torch off, turning this block off, turning this dust off, turning this torch on, and it goes blah, 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 blah. I don't like it, and then it fizzes out. And usually there are not many applications for this. Usually you want to avoid this type of situation. There are a few uses for it, and we will talk about that later down the line, but that's just something to be aware of and something to try and avoid unless you're looking for a very specific situation. And believe me, you'll know when a situation like that comes up because it's pretty rare. So, using what we know about sending, well, about torches on the side of a block, we can actually send wiring downwards, and it's not quite as compact as the vertical wiring upwards, but this is how we send wiring downwards. So, as you can see right here, this block is not receiving any power. The lever is in the off position. So this torch is free to power this dust. As we learn, it gives second degree power to the block right below it, in this case redstone dust, energizing this block. Redstone dust is the exception to the rule, by the way, here. So despite this receiving second degree power, because it's redstone dust, it still gives this block first degree power. And that will then turn this torch off, which will then turn this dust off, which will then will depower this block, which will then let the torch come on here, and then let this dust turn on, and so on. The cycle repeats itself. And if I flick the lever, everything inverts and the light comes on. So, yeah, that's how you send wiring downwards. Now, this doesn't have to be an output here. This could be on either of these two. This could be some wiring that goes somewhere else or joins onto something else. But I just wanted to show you in a simple demo how to send wiring vertically and, well, vertically upwards and vertically downwards using the redstone torch. That's one of the most common uses for the redstone torch. So, now we've got that out of the way, let's talk about where the torch will power in relation to some special quirks. So, as we know, the redstone torch will power any block here with second degree power, but notice it does not power the one right here. Even if I put these two here, as you can see, the one way over here does not get powered. And that makes a lot of sense because it's not within the range of the torch. However, there is one special exception to the rule, and that is sticky pistons and pistons. So these have a kind of quirk, and watch what happens here. This torch is on, which then powers this piston. And the piston has like an extra, think of it like an extra additional sensor built into the top of it, like right here, so that it can detect when this block above it, so this block right here, this one, is receiving power, and then it powers itself. So, let's look at this. So here we are, here's an example. We have this block is now being energized, which is powering this piston, and we have redstone dust above it, which is powering this piston. That is probably what you're thinking is in relation to this. You can just do this, and yeah, it works fine. You can do that if you want to, but what if we wanted to use two sets of pistons like this? Watch what happens. If I flick the lever on, only the bottom pistons activate, and the reason for that is, like we learned in the last episode, the redstone line here is not facing into the pistons, so they don't get powered. So this is where this quirk comes in handy. If we've got this set up right here, as you can see, we've got the torches currently on because the lever is off and all 4 pistons are being powered. If I turn this lever on, which energizes this block and the dust above it, and the dust right here, it will turn the torches off, retracting the pistons. And the reason we have this dust here is, as you know, this is receiving 1st degree power. You would need to have some sort of output here. This is receiving 2nd degree power. So we have to put the redstone dust on top to give this block 1st degree power, which then turns off these 2 torches. There we go. And using this you can even make power go 3 high. Here's a 3 high example. We have right here, if I turn this on, this lever on, this block is receiving 1st degree power, which turns this torch off, which turns this block off, which turns this dust off. So if I flick it back on again, whoops, we can, as you can see, all 3 pistons extend, and that's because the torch right here is providing 2nd degree power to this piston. I'm just going to set the time to day. So this piston activates. It is also sending power to this redstone dust right here. This is receiving 1st degree power. So this piston extends. This also receives power and extends the 3rd piston. So this is a great way. I mean, you could put the redstone dust from behind here to a pressure plate, and as we learned in the last episode, with pressure plates you can put wiring directly below a block and create a very, very simple 3x2 door using this. So I'm not going to show it off right here, but what you would need to do is bring your redstone around here, put it underneath somewhere around here, and then you would be able to have a opening double door. So that's pretty much everything in relation to the redstone torch on its own. We are going to come back to the redstone torch in more detail when we start looking at some of the logic gates and circuits in this series a little bit later on. So now let's move on and talk about the block of redstone. Similarly to the redstone torch, the redstone block will also act as a source of power, which will transmit 15 blocks. It has the unique property that a redstone torch doesn't, in the fact that it can be placed underwater and you can put lights around and do whatever with it, so that you can have underwater lights for the squiddies. But we're going to come back to this in a minute. It has one unique property over the redstone torch, and that is the fact that it can be moved. It's a block, so it can be pushed around by pistons, as seen in this demo right here. So as you can see, by default it's giving power to this wire, which is going to this lamp. If I make the piston extend, it's going to push the block here, powering this dust, which is then powering this lamp instead. Now if you look here, if I used a redstone torch here instead, that's a bad example, but let me just move this block right here. If I used a torch here, you would actually see that it gives power, but with a redstone block it only passes on 2nd degree power. So this is not receiving any power at all. Well, it's receiving 2nd degree power, but as we know, 2nd degree power does not pass on. It's not energized. It does not have energy in it, should I say, which means that this lamp is not being powered. So as you can see right here, these lamps are receiving 2nd degree power, which is why they're turned on. But if I was to put a lamp right here, it's not powered, and that's because it's receiving 2nd degree power. So that's a very, very important thing to consider with the redstone block. It only admits 2nd degree power. And here's the crafting recipe. Just 9 redstone in the crafting grid, 1 in each slot, and you get a block of redstone. You can actually get 9 redstone from dropping one of these in the crafting grid, so it's a great way to store redstone compactly in a chest. Here is another use of it. You can make this use what's known as a delayless repeater, I believe it's called. And that brings me on to something that I actually missed when we were talking about the redstone torch, and that is the fact that the redstone torch provides 1 tick of delay for each torch there is, and 1 tick in redstone means simply 1/10 of a second. So as you can see right here, if I flick the lever again, it's not instant to when the light turns on. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 torches, so 6/10 of a second. And we'll talk about timing more when we get into repeaters and different piston things and more advanced circuits where timing becomes important. But that was something I actually neglected to mention, but have done now. So this redstone block can be used as a, I believe it's called a delayless repeater. To be honest, this is not that useful. We don't use this very often. The comparator isn't needed, it's just kind of here for demonstration. It'll work just fine if I do that, but I've never seen it. Ah, yeah, that's it. You need a comparator here because I believe this is a bug or a quirk whereby once the dust is extended here, the piston will not retract, so you need a comparator here. Or I think you might be able to do it with a repeater. Yeah, you can do it with a repeater or a comparator, and this is a delayless way of repeating a signal. And we'll talk about repeating signals more in the next episode when we talk about redstone repeaters, but this is not that useful. I've never seen this really used. And here's another example which we will talk about more later, which is a use of the redstone block, and this is a redstone clock. So we'll talk about redstone clocks later, but what I'm trying to say here with these two demonstrations is the redstone block is mainly used in circuits and in logic gates rather than on its own, whereas the redstone torch is used more on its own, and a lot of the time it is applied in this stuff, but it does a lot on its own. This guy, not so much. This doesn't do a whole lot on its own, to be honest. It's more used as a circuit component, where you can compact circuits down using this guy over using the redstone torches. So yeah, that's pretty much about it as regards this. Those of you who are Minecraft veterans will know that this demonstration right here is actually what used to be a repeater before we actually had the redstone repeater. This guy. We used to use this to send signals long ways, but now we have repeaters so we can compact it down a little more. And talking of repeaters, that's what we're going to be looking at in the next episode. We're going to be talking about redstone repeaters. It's a very useful piece of redstone circuitry, but this is not as hard as this. This is probably this is the hardest key component to get your head around. The others are fairly standard, the inputs and outputs. The dust is quite easy to understand. The repeater, there's not much to it, and the comparator is kind of, once you actually look at it from what it's doing, it's fairly easy to understand what the comparator actually does. So if you understand what I've said today, congratulations. If you don't, then please fire away in the comments, ask me a question, and I will do my best to answer it. I hope that you have found this tutorial formal. Formal? It's not very formal, but you know what I mean. Not informal, but what's that word? Brain freeze. How would I put it? I hope you found this tutorial useful, is the best way I can think of putting it off the top of my head. And I hope that you now understand redstone torches if you didn't, or if you did, you've learned something new, along with the redstone block as well. So as I say, in the next episode we will talk about the redstone repeater, and if you have any questions, please put them in the comments. And if I have a lot of questions, I will come back to it at the end, and I'll do a roundup of all the questions, but I will probably answer in the comments most of the time. So yeah, if you're confused, please feel free to ask me in the comments. So also, this particular section will be available to download as a world in the description, so that you can play around with all these different devices. If you want to understand them a little more, then you can do that. There will be a link down below, which will take you to the MediaFire page, where you can grab just this particular section in a flat sandstone world like this, where you can play around some more. So yeah, that pretty much covers it. I think there's not a whole lot more to talk about. As I say, next episode we will talk about the redstone repeater, and I hope to see you then. So until then guys, see you later and have a good day.